Living in a suburban neighborhood with an HOA was supposed to be peaceful. You paid the fees, mowed your lawn, followed the weird rules about mailbox heights, and in return, you got peace and quiet. At least, that's what I thought when I moved my family here. The reality was far different. Our HOA had recently decided to employ a self-appointed security team. These weren't professionals. No, they were neighborhood busybodies, fueled by a power trip and armed with neon vests and two-way radios. Some of them even carried pepper spray like they were preparing for a war zone. It was a disaster waiting to happen, but I never imagined just how bad it could get. My daughter, Emily, was home from college that summer. She had just completed her FBI tactical commander training and was waiting for her first assignment. Nobody in the neighborhood knew that. To them, she was just another 20-something girl in jeans and a hoodie, driving an old black Jeep that she loved more than life itself. It all started on a Saturday afternoon. Emily had driven to the local park for a run, and when she came back, she found a man standing by her Jeep, arms crossed, with a scowl deep enough to bury a coin. He wore a vest that said HOA Security in big bold letters like he was patrolling a federal building, not a sleepy cul-de-sac. According to Emily, the man immediately started barking at her about parking violations. She wasn't even parked illegally, her tires weren't touching the sidewalk, she wasn't blocking a hydrant, but he insisted she was breaking community regulations. Emily, calm as ever, apologized and offered to move her car. That should have been the end of it. But no. This guy's ego was bigger than the HOA budget. Witnesses later told me that he got right up in her face, started accusing her of trespassing, even though she lived there. Emily didn't escalate. She tried to de-escalate, which is exactly what she was trained to do. She kept her hands visible, spoke calmly, and backed away to give him space. That's when he pulled a gun. Right there, in broad daylight, in front of half the neighborhood, HOA security decided that my daughter, a homeowner's daughter, was such a threat that he needed to point a firearm at her. Emily's instincts kicked in. She didn't reach for her own weapon, because she wasn't carrying, but her training screamed at her to control the situation. And that's when everything changed. Emily didn't move a muscle. Training kicked in faster than thought. She kept her hands open and visible, voice steady as a rock, speaking in a calm, authoritative tone. "Sir, put the weapon down. You're escalating an unnecessary situation," she said, as if she was back in training exercises instead of facing a real, trembling gun barrel. The HOA security officer, a man later identified as Randy Perkins, didn't budge. His face flushed a deep red, veins popping out of his neck like he was lifting a truck. He barked something about citizen's arrest and hostile threats, words he barely understood himself. Meanwhile, a crowd was gathering. Neighbors peered out from behind half-closed doors and gathered at the edge of their lawns. Some had their phones out. Some just stared in stunned silence. But nobody intervened. After all, who expects your suburban HOA to turn into a live-action standoff? Emily's heart raced, but her face stayed neutral. She knew she had two objectives: de-escalate and survive. She slowly shifted her weight, reading Randy's body language. He was scared, more dangerous because of it. "Sir, you are committing a felony," she said firmly. "Put the gun down before someone gets hurt." Instead, Randy's hand twitched. He shouted something incoherent about terrorists infiltrating the community and defending his rights. Classic paranoid fantasy stuff. If he pulled that trigger, Emily knew it would be out of panic, not malice. She needed a distraction. Without moving her feet, she glanced slightly to the side, a technique called misdirection. Randy's gaze followed, instinctively. In that millisecond, Emily moved. A quick step inside his reach, two hands up, a clean disarm maneuver taught to every FBI tactical candidate. The gun was stripped from his grip and tossed onto the grass before Randy even registered what happened. He stumbled backward, blinking stupidly at his empty hands. Emily kept her stance defensive, not aggressive. She didn't touch him. She didn't need to. She just stood between him and the gun, hands raised, projecting command authority that made even the spectators flinch. "Someone call 911, she said loudly without taking her eyes off Randy. "There's been an aggravated assault with a deadly weapon." Finally, movement stirred in the crowd. Phones came up. Someone, thankfully, started dialing. Randy, realizing he'd lost control of the situation, did what people like him always do when cornered: he lied. Loudly. "She attacked me," he bellowed, pointing a shaking finger. "She stole my weapon. She's crazy. Arrest her." The words were desperate, unconvincing. Emily said nothing. She didn't need to. The witnesses had seen everything. The video evidence was rolling. And most importantly, the law, for once, was on her side. Sirens wailed in the distance. Randy's face drained of color as the realization hit him. He wasn't the hero in this story. He was the criminal. The police arrived in record time, tires screeching as 3 cruisers swarmed the quiet neighborhood. Officers jumped out, weapons drawn but scanning carefully, trained, professional. Emily immediately complied with standard procedure, raising her hands and stepping away from both Randy and the gun on the grass. "I'm unarmed," she said loudly and clearly, projecting calm authority. "The firearm is over there. I am the victim. Witnesses are present." The lead officer, a tall woman with sharp eyes, took one look at the situation: the scared man babbling nonsense, the composed young woman standing straight, and the cluster of neighbors filming, and made her call. 2 officers approached Emily cautiously but respectfully, checking her for weapons, while another cuffed Randy, who was still sputtering about sovereign rights and deep state conspiracies. "What happened here?" the lead officer asked Emily once things were secured. Emily didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pulled a slim wallet from her back pocket, opened it, and displayed her credentials. "FBI Tactical Commander, Special Response Division." You could almost hear the collective gasp from the watching neighbors. The officer's eyebrows shot up. "Well, that explains a lot," she muttered under her breath before straightening. "Ma'am, are you injured?" "No, officer," Emily replied crisply. "However, I would like to press charges for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, false imprisonment, and unlawful threat under color of authority." The officer nodded, like that was the most natural thing in the world. Meanwhile, Randy had gone from shouting to stunned silence. His eyes locked onto Emily's badge, and you could see the moment his brain broke. All that misplaced authority, all that manufactured power, shattered in an instant by someone who actually had the real thing. They stuffed Randy into the back of a cruiser, still dazed, while Emily gave her statement. The officers took witness testimonies next. Dozens of neighbors, some of whom hadn't spoken a word to each other in years, were now eager to recount every detail. Cell phone videos were reviewed. From 5 different angles, Randy's aggressive behavior was caught on tape: the yelling, the gun draw, the threats, and Emily's flawless, textbook disarmament. If it weren't so serious, it might have been funny. One officer even commented quietly, "I wish half our recruits handled themselves that well." Emily didn't smile. She was still operating in tactical mode, professional, detached, focused on facts. But I could see the tension in her shoulders as she called me to explain what happened. "Dad," she said simply, "you need to come down to the station. They'll need a statement from you too." I was already grabbing my keys before she finished the sentence. By the time I arrived, Randy was already being booked. And that's when the real fun began, because HOA Randy wasn't just a bad security guard. He had a past. While Emily finished her paperwork, I sat in the station lobby tapping my foot, trying to keep my anger in check. My daughter had been threatened at gunpoint by a delusional neighbor who thought a $10 security vest made him judge, jury, and executioner. An officer eventually waved me back. Emily was calm as ever, speaking professionally to the detectives, but when she saw me, a flicker of relief crossed her face. I wanted to hug her right there, but she gave a slight shake of her head. "Not yet. Stay composed." One of the detectives briefed me, your daughter handled herself better than most officers would have. Honestly, sir, we're lucky she was the one involved. This could have ended very badly. I nodded, heart heavy. And you're going to want to hear this, he added grimly. Turns out, Randy Perkins had more than just a temper and a badge complex. A background check revealed multiple prior incidents, unlawful detainment, impersonating law enforcement, even a restraining order from a former coworker who accused him of stalking. How he got approved to be part of the HOA security team was a mystery, one that would later bring down several board members. But it got worse. Apparently, Randy had been running his own unauthorized neighborhood watch program for months, intimidating residents, issuing fake citations, and harassing anyone he deemed suspicious. Several complaints had been filed against him, all quietly buried by the HOA leadership to avoid lawsuits. This wasn't just a hothead with a gun. This was a walking lawsuit waiting to happen, and now, thanks to his stupidity, the whole ugly mess was about to come crashing down. Detectives decided to charge Randy not just with aggravated assault, but also with impersonating a law enforcement officer, illegal brandishing of a firearm, and endangerment. Serious felonies. The kind that didn't end with a slap on the wrist. While they processed paperwork, I sat with Emily in a side room. Finally, she let the tough exterior crack, just a little. You okay, kiddo? I asked. She nodded, but her voice was softer. Yeah. I'm just mad. Mad that people like him get to run around scaring others. Mad that if I hadn't been trained, this could have gone very differently. I didn't have words good enough to fix that anger. So I just squeezed her hand. Proud of you, I said simply. She smiled, small and tired, but real. At that moment, an officer poked his head in. You're gonna want to hear this, he said. Apparently, Randy wasn't going quietly. In fact, from the back of the squad car, he was already on the phone, with his lawyer, and threatening to sue everyone from Emily to the police department to the entire city for violating his constitutional rights. Typical. The detectives weren't worried. His threats were empty. The evidence was overwhelming. But it did mean the next few days would be interesting. And it meant war with the HOA. Because if Randy was going down, he wasn't planning to go alone. The next morning, before the sun was even properly up, my phone exploded with notifications. Emails, text messages, HOA bulletin blasts, the whole neighborhood was in a meltdown. Apparently, Randy's arrest had gone viral overnight. Someone had uploaded the cell phone footage of the confrontation to a local community Facebook group, and from there it spread like wildfire. By dawn, it had been picked up by a few news outlets with the headline, HOA security officer pulls gun on FBI tactical commander, immediate arrest ensues. You couldn't write a better headline if you tried. The HOA board scrambled to do damage control. They issued a vague statement condemning recent actions by a volunteer and promised an internal review of security protocols. It was a laughable attempt at distancing themselves, especially since records showed the board had officially appointed Randy to his security role without any background checks. Worse yet for them, people began digging deeper. An anonymous whistleblower leaked internal HOA emails showing that several complaints against Randy had been deliberately ignored. Some board members had even joked about him being our personal little watchdog. That didn't look so funny now. Meanwhile, Emily remained calm. She stayed out of the public eye, declined all interview requests, and focused on cooperating with the official investigation. She had no interest in becoming a media celebrity. She just wanted justice, real justice. But it wasn't that simple. 2 days later, a legal letter arrived at our doorstep, a notice from the HOA accusing Emily of violating community safety rules and demanding a hearing to determine potential fines or even eviction proceedings. It was absurd. It was infuriating. It was also exactly what I had expected. See, people like Randy, and the cowards who enabled him, never admit fault. When caught, they double down. They try to intimidate, to bully, to shift blame. They think if they shout loud enough, if they bury you in paperwork and threats, you'll back down. They didn't know who they were dealing with. Emily calmly handed me the letter. "I'll handle it," she said. And she did. First, she filed an official retaliation complaint with the City Housing Authority, citing the HOA's actions as harassment against a crime victim. Then she contacted a friend, an actual attorney specializing in civil rights violations. Within 24 hours, a countersuit was in motion: wrongful retaliation, violation of fair housing laws, and emotional distress. The HOA board had lit a match in a dry forest. They had no idea how fast it was about to burn. Word spread quickly among the other residents. People who had long resented the HOA's heavy-handed tactics now saw an opportunity to push back. A petition started circulating, calling for the immediate dissolution of the current board and a full audit of HOA finances. Within 3 days, the petition had enough signatures to force a special election. Meanwhile, Randy sat in county jail, denied bail on account of being a potential danger to the community. Poetic justice. And yet, through it all, Emily stayed professional, composed. She wasn't done. Not yet. Because there was still one more surprise waiting in the wings, and it was going to be the final nail in the HOA's coffin. It happened during the special HOA meeting, the one called after the petition forced the board into public accountability. They booked the community center, expecting maybe a handful of angry residents. Instead, half the neighborhood showed up. People packed into the folding chairs, lined the walls, even stood outside peering through the windows. Cameras rolled. Reporters lurked at the back. It wasn't just a meeting anymore. It was a trial. The board members, wearing forced smiles and stiff suits, opened the meeting with legalistic statements about process and respectful dialogue. They tried to spin the narrative, how they were shocked by Randy's behavior, how they couldn't have known he was unstable. Then Emily walked in. She didn't storm or grandstand. She simply entered in plain clothes, carrying a single manila folder. Heads turned. Whispers rippled through the crowd. She waited until the board finished their hollow apologies, then quietly approached the microphone when the floor was opened for community comments. "Good evening," she said calmly. "My name is Emily Carter. I'm a resident of this community. I was the individual assaulted by your appointed security officer, Mr. Perkins." A murmur ran through the room. "I'd like to submit into the record evidence that not only did the board knowingly approve Mr. Perkins without a proper background check, but several board members were fully aware of previous complaints against him and chose to suppress them." She opened the folder and laid out printed copies of emails, complaint forms, internal messages leaked by the whistleblower. Everything neatly catalogued, cross-referenced, time-stamped. The board members paled visibly. And furthermore, Emily continued, voice still steady, under Title 42 of the U.S. Code, Section 1983, I am filing suit against this HOA for conspiracy to violate civil rights, negligence, and harassment. You could hear a pin drop. The president of the HOA, a sweaty man named Carl Whitmore, sputtered into his microphone, trying to object. Something about misrepresentation and out-of-context emails. Emily didn't flinch. "I suggest you consult with your legal counsel before making public statements that may be used against you in court," she said smoothly. "Because discovery will be thorough." The room exploded. Residents stood up, shouting questions. Some demanded immediate resignations. Others waved copies of the petition, chanting for a vote to disband the board. The scene turned chaotic, but not violent, as decades of simmering resentment boiled over. In the middle of it all, Emily stayed calm, collected, almost clinical. This wasn't revenge. It was accountability. When the board realized they were trapped, on camera, on record, legally cornered, several members simply walked out. Whitmore tried to gavel the meeting closed, but nobody listened. A neighbor called for a snap vote under the HOA bylaws, and before the night was over, the entire board had been ousted. It was historic. It was beautiful. It was just the beginning. Because taking down the HOA wasn't the endgame, Not for Emily. There was still the matter of Randy, and making sure he never terrorized another community again. With the HOA board dismantled and the lawsuit officially filed, you might think things would start winding down. You'd be wrong. Because Emily had one final objective: to make sure Randy Perkins faced real, permanent consequences, not just a slap on the wrist and a quiet relocation to terrorize some other poor neighborhood. It started with the criminal case. Emily worked closely with the district attorney, providing detailed testimony, footage, and expert analysis of Randy's actions. Her FBI training added weight to her words in court. When she described his behavior as reckless endangerment with lethal potential, jurors listened. Meanwhile, Randy's defense team tried every trick in the book. They painted him as a concerned citizen, a patriot, even a misguided volunteer who meant no real harm. They blamed the HOA for giving him false authority. They blamed Emily for provoking him, a laughable claim shredded under cross-examination. But the real nail in Randy's coffin came during discovery. Emily's legal team unearthed a hidden trove of online posts from Randy's private accounts, paranoid rants, threats, fantasies about using violence to protect the community from invaders, racist tirades, conspiracy theories, even thinly veiled threats against named neighbors, some of whom were sitting in the courtroom. When those posts were presented to the jury, any shred of sympathy Randy might have had evaporated. In the end, the verdict was swift and brutal. Guilty on all counts. Aggravated assault. Impersonation of an officer. Unlawful brandishing. Threatening behavior. The judge didn't mince words during sentencing either. He called Randy a danger to civilized society and sentenced him to 8 years in prison, with no possibility of parole for at least 6. Some thought it was harsh. Emily thought it was necessary. Meanwhile, civil suits piled up. Multiple residents filed claims against Randy and the old HOA board. Settlement figures leaked to the press suggested hundreds of thousands in payouts. Insurance rates for the neighborhood skyrocketed. Property values dipped temporarily, but most residents agreed it was a price worth paying to clean house. As for the HOA itself, it was restructured from the ground up under new leadership, with strict new bylaws, real background checks, limited authority for security, mandatory transparency. Emily declined offers to join the new board. She'd done her part. She had bigger plans now. The incident sparked something deeper inside her, a calling she hadn't fully recognized before. Standing up to Randy wasn't just personal. It was a reminder of why she'd joined the bureau in the first place: to protect people. To stop bullies, big and small. To make sure that fear didn't win. A few months later, she transferred from her tactical unit to a new role, Civil Rights Division. Special focus on combating abuses of authority, both public and private. Because bullies don't always wear badges. Sometimes, they wear HOA pins. Tea wasn't immediate, but over time, the neighborhood began to heal. Kids returned to the playground without parents hovering nervously. Barbecues and block parties sprang back to life. Neighbors who had once exchanged only wary glances now shared coffee, swapped gardening tips, and laughed together in the afternoons. Emily could walk down the street without feeling the weight of everyone's fear pressing against her. She had become something of a quiet legend among the residents, the woman who stood up, they called her, though she didn't bask in the attention. She just smiled politely and went about her day, knowing the real work was still ahead. One evening, as the sun dipped low and bathed the neighborhood in gold, Emily sat on her front porch with her daughter, Mia. They shared a bowl of ice cream, listening to the sounds of distant laughter. Mia, now fully aware of everything that had happened, looked up at her mom with big, serious eyes. "Will there always be people like him?" she asked. Emily thought about it. About the Randys of the world, loud, angry, desperate for control they didn't deserve. She thought about fear and courage and the cost of standing up. She thought about the friends she had lost in the line of duty, and the battles she had yet to fight. Finally, she answered, her voice steady. "Yeah, honey," she said. "There will always be bullies. Always someone trying to scare others into silence. She smiled, brushing a stray curl from Mia's forehead. But there will always be people like us too. People who don't back down. People who protect. Mia considered that, then nodded solemnly, the kind of nod that made Emily's heart swell with pride. The future would be in good hands. The next morning, Emily packed her things for her first assignment with the Civil Rights Division. She kissed Mia goodbye, promised she'd be home soon, and drove toward the city skyline. A new chapter was waiting. New bullies. New battles. New victories. As she merged onto the freeway, the radio crackled to life with a call. Attention all units, report of unauthorized private security intimidating residents in Oak Hollow Estates. Possible weapons involved. Emily smiled grimly. Different neighborhood. Same fight. And she was ready. Always ready.